You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today we're bringing you an episode from Lifeline, offering a holistic wellness approach focused on supporting American law enforcement, promoting resilience, safety, and survivability. I'm Christopher Mitchell. On today's special episode of Lifeline, Matt Garcia, project manager for all things in our officer safety and wellness pillar, sits down with Ambassador Tom Weitzel, retired police chief of the Riverside, Illinois Police Department, to discuss an incident he encountered early on in his career. During this episode, Matt and Tom discuss the importance of peer support networks to assist officers after critical incidences and how leadership can play a more active role in the recovery process. The mission of the Law Enforcement Ambassadors is to support the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund and their vision of inspiring all citizens to value law enforcement and the vital role it plays in our society in tandem with their mission to honor the fallen, tell the story of American law enforcement, and make it safer for those who serve. The National Law Enforcement Officers Ambassador Program would not be possible without the generous support of Mission Square Retirement. And now for Tom Weitzel, surviving and thriving after an armed encounter.
Well, welcome to today's podcast. Before we dive into our intriguing topic, I'd like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Mission Square Financial for their unwavering support of our Law Enforcement Ambassador Program. Mission Square Financial has been dedicated to delivering result-oriented retirement plan services for over 50 years, helping more than 3 million public servants retire with financial security through convenient paycheck contributions and tax benefits. I'm your host, Matthew Garcia, proud member of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund Law Enforcement Ambassador Program, and a retired Connecticut State Trooper. Today, we have a very special guest with us, someone who has an extraordinary career in law enforcement. Please join me in welcoming NLEOMF Ambassador Tom Weitzel, retired police chief of the Riverside, Illinois Police Department. Tom dedicated an impressive 37 years of his life to serving and protecting his community, with 13 of those years as chief of police. Now, let's take a step back in time to August 12, 1987. It was a relatively cool summer morning with the sunrise still hours away. Riverside, like many small towns, had local ordinances designed to maintain the integrity of the community, one of which was the prohibition of street-side parking after 2 a.m. Our law enforcement officers were keenly aware of these regulations, and any violation would certainly catch their attention. On that morning, Officer Tom Weitzel, who had just 3 years of experience with the Riverside Police Department, could still be considered a rookie by some standards. At 3 a.m., he found himself patrolling the 2-square-mile community in a single patrol car. As he cruised through the streets, Tom noticed a vehicle parked along the curb in front of a residential home. With a sense of duty, he pulled his patrol car behind the vehicle and used his spotlight to illuminate the interior. The windows were tinted so dark that even the spotlight struggled to pierce the darkness. What Tom didn't know at that moment was that a decision he had made 3 years earlier would soon prove to be a life-saving one. Tom?
Thank you, Matt, for that wonderful introduction. And I'm so honored to be part of this great program, the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund and the Ambassadors Program.
Thank you. If you could take us from that moment, you've pulled over now. We would call this in as a suspicious vehicle. Take us from that moment. What happened next?
Well, to kind of set the groundwork, Riverside, Illinois is a small community, about 9,000 residents. It's just west of the city of Chicago. In August of 1987, I had only 3 years on the job. And you're right in your introduction. I mean, in my agency, they considered you a rookie unless you had 5 years on the job. So in small suburban policing, it takes a while to see a lot of things that larger municipalities see more frequently. On this night, I was on patrol. We did single vehicle patrol vehicles. We had no 2-man cars in Riverside during that time period. And that was designed to put more officers on the street. But on that night, there was only 2 officers on the street. We usually have 3, but they had an officer called in sick for that shift, and they didn't replace that individual that night. And I was on a residential street about 3 a.m. in the morning. I'm driving down, and there's a car parked on the wrong side of the street, meaning left wheel of curb, with no lights on. And what I mean by that is Riverside had this ordinance where you had to have your parking lights on when you parked on the street because they had no street lights. They had these aesthetically beautiful gas lights that went throughout the village as part of its historical character. While they looked very nice and were beautiful, they provided zero lighting. So it was more aesthetic looking than it was to help you find your way through the village. Plus, the village is set up in a circular pattern. It was designed by a famed landscape architect named Frederick Law Olmsted, and they didn't design the streets in a grid pattern. They were very difficult to find your way around, especially in the dark. On this night, that car was parked in violation of the ordinance. You couldn't be on the street parking unless you called it in after 2 a.m. This was after 3 a.m. As I approached in my squad car, I could see that it had no license plates on it and no temporary plates. And it had dark windows. And when I hit the back of the window with my spotlight, it literally bounced off. It was really, really heavy tint. I mean, I could tell that they had custom. This was not tinting that came with the manufacturer of the car. The spotlight literally bounced back towards my squad car. So as I would normally do, I was getting out of the car to go get the VIN number, the vehicle identification number, to run the ownership of the vehicle and see if it had been stolen because there were no license plates. And as I exited my patrol car, as I got to my bumper, an individual rolled out of the back door. And I mean, he rolled out. So the back door of the driver's side opened, and an individual in all black dropped to the ground, and he had a hoodie on. And he immediately racked the shotgun and shot at me. And I could hear the rack. I knew it was coming. I immediately heard the pump shotgun rack, and he fired directly at me. And at that time, he hit me in my bulletproof vest, directly in my bulletproof vest. But what had happened is he had shot birdshot. And as the distance between the car, the offender's car, and my car, there was some distance there, maybe about a car length, and the pellets spread. So while most of the pellets hit my chest, there were some pellets that pierced my eyes, and I was like immediately blinded from that. And what had happened is the force of the blast kind of lifted me up a little bit, and I hit the back of the front of the bumper of my squad car, and it knocked me out momentarily. So I was probably out for about 30 to 45 seconds before I came to. And when I came to, there was commotion in the house that the car was parked in front of, in the bushes. I could see people running from the front bushes to the car. And as I reached for my portable radio, it just flew off me because the shotgun blast had cut the wire from my portable unit on my belt to my lapel microphone. So it was useless. So I literally had to crawl back to the squad car and pick up the microphone that was in the squad car itself to call in that I needed assistance. And during that time, the vehicle fled. And I'm positive that initially the reason I wasn't shot a second time was it was very close proximity. It was a very violent act. It was loud. And I'm sure that this individual that shot me thought I was dead because I was knocked out for almost a minute. So I think that's one reason they didn't come back, or at least the shooter didn't come back and stand over me and pump another one in. So obviously I was very thankful for that. But the car fled, and the car fled east towards the city of Chicago from the scene. And then I was able to broadcast that shooting had taken, officer-involved shooting had taken place, and that I needed assistance.
This next portion contains original audio from Tom Weitzel's radio calls to dispatch after his encounter with that suspicious vehicle. We received this audio directly from Tom and have his permission to share it. This audio has never before been shared with the public. A trigger warning is advised as this can be emotionally distressing for those who have experienced a similar situation, whether in law enforcement or not.
Hi, check on a car sitting on the wrong side of the street, dark. It's got one of the doors open. The vehicle has no plates. It looks like a beater, four-door green LCD. I don't see anybody in it, but it's got those darkened windows. Get me out! 10-4. North Riverside, do you have a unit? I have a unit over there, Northgate Court and Northgate. Emergency. It's off of Selborne. Riverside, I've been shot. It's a home invasion. They're armed. Sorry, Riverside, I've been shot. They're armed with shotguns. One's heading towards 26, the other, the car's fleeing eastbound. I can't pursue them. I've been shot in the chest. Riverside, give me an ambulance here right away. What's the vehicle description? The beater green Ford LTD four-door. It's got the darkened windows, no plates. There's at least 3 male lights. They got some black hoods on them, like they're ninja suits or something. Officer is down by his unit, responding units. At least 3 more units, please. He's out in the open.
I want to go back to that decision to wear a bulletproof vest. You know, in today's day of law enforcement, departments are providing officers with bulletproof vests. There's grant money out there for these purchases. They're cycling vests out every 5 years. There's much more attention to the need and to the benefit of wearing vests. Back in 1987, that wasn't the case. Not everybody had bulletproof vests. A lot of officers went without them. They were extremely heavy back then. I remember my first bulletproof vest back in 1996, and that was much heavier than the one that I had at the time of retirement. And so your decision to wear a vest, what led to that? What made you different than some of the others that chose not to wear a vest?
Yeah, you're right on spot with that. My agency did not provide funding for vests in 1987. If you wanted to purchase the vest, you had to do it on your own. Not all officers did it. In fact, there were several officers I worked with that didn't wear the vest at all. I had purchased mine, and my wife encouraged me to purchase it. But what actually had happened is my wife purchased it as a gift for me, meaning she gave me the money, and then we went to a local police uniform supply company in Illinois, and I got fit for the vest. At that time, it was a point blank, and that vest then became mine. And I also had that shock plate, and back then those shock plates were metal. They weren't the soft Kevlar ones. Now it was very heavy, and my wife just didn't want me to be working in law enforcement without a vest. And I didn't really work much day shift. Being only on 3 years, I basically worked either 4 to midnight or midnight to 8 in the morning. It was almost always a nighttime shift. It made her feel safe. And in retrospect, it was a really good choice, because I wasn't going out to buy one until she really kind of made a demand for that. Look what happened. It literally saved my life.
After the shooting, you're taken to the hospital. And now we give a lot of attention to the need for peer support, for care after the incident. But again, back then in 1987, and I think the mentality for even for a long time after that was you're expected to sort of deal with it and move on. The support isn't there as it is today. What was it like for you after the shooting, the days following the shooting, and what you received for support from the department?
Sadly, it was really, really poor, and that was from the department administrative staff. The rank and file officers were extremely supportive, but you had to take into consideration that they had never had a police officer shot in the line of duty, and they didn't really know how to handle it. And a really clear example of that is, as I was being put into the paramedic unit, I mean, I asked for a paramedic unit from the village of North Riverside, which was next to us, because ours was farther away. Plus, we had railroad tracks that cut the village in half, and our fire station was on the other side of the tracks. And as I wanted them to notify my wife, so I told the paramedics, have somebody call my wife. I was kind of really going in and out of being able to stay conscious, and they just told me they'll handle it. They'll have somebody handle it. Well, as it turns out, my wife said that the police chief showed up at her door probably about 4 a.m. I lived just on the border of Riverside and North Riverside, so they were there very quickly. And he knocked on the door, and you can imagine she woke up at 4 in the morning, half dressed, answered the door, and all the chief said at that time was, "Your husband's been shot. I don't know if he's alive or dead. You need to get dressed and meet me down in the parking lot. I'm going to take you to the hospital." That was it. And then he left her and went down and sat in his patrol car while she got dressed. We had a police officer that lived across the hall. This was an apartment complex. My wife knocked on their door at 4 in the morning, told them what had happened, and asked them if they could meet her at the hospital because the chief would not allow another family to go into the car with him. He drove my wife to Loyola University Medical Center, which is in a town called Maywood, Illinois. It's only about 5 miles from Riverside. He dropped her at the ER waiting room, and he left. My wife told me he left her alone. There were no officers there yet. There was no peer support. But what was there shortly after my wife was dropped off was media. So then my wife was surrounded by media personnel in the ER waiting room, not knowing my condition and not having any representative from the department that could handle the media relations. So it started off really, really poor. And then it just got worse over the months from there. I mean, to say what happened directly afterwards was I was treated at the emergency room for broken ribs, internal bleeding, and eye injuries. And I remember the emergency room doctor coming over to me, and they took my vest off and they kept it for evidence, but it was a female emergency room physician. She picked up the vest and showed it to me, and she goes, "You're lucky to be alive." And then she said to me, when the paramedics called in that they were coming in with a police officer with a gunshot victim with a shotgun, I thought there was not much hope. So she said, this vest really did save your life. And in the weeks that followed, it was some real criticism. For example, the department sent their detective to interview me, and at that time they sent the detective supervisor, which was the rank of lieutenant. And his main concern was why I didn't return fire. And I remember sitting there telling him, this was an ambush. I didn't, and they were like criticizing me, like, "Tom, we took possession of your weapon. You didn't fire any rounds. You didn't return fire. You're not dead. You're alive. Can you explain to us why you did not return fire?" The individual rolled out of the car and pumped the shotgun and shot me. I didn't have a chance. Well, by the time I came up, they were leaving. If I had fired rounds, I would have been just shooting them down a residential street at nobody. They would just go into people's homes. But I felt this immediate criticism, like somehow I had failed. And then as the weeks and months went by, I became under a lot of pressure from my chief at that time. The Bulletproof Vest Company, point blank, reached out to the chief and said, "We'd like to talk to Tom about doing an ad for us. And then he'll do this ad and we will supply your whole department with bulletproof vests for free." So the chief reached out to me and said, "Hey, Point Blank wants to talk to you." When I called Point Blank, they said, "We want to do a big magazine spread and police chief magazines and law enforcement magazines, and we want to feature your story." But what they did, Matt, is they wanted to embellish it. They wanted it to make it seem more, there was this gun battle, or that I tried to return fire and I couldn't, and I felt that it wasn't right, and I turned them down. And I remember my chief calling me and says, "What are you doing, Tom? you have the opportunity to fund free bulletproof vests for every single officer because of what happened to you, and you won't do this media campaign. I said, no, first of all, I don't want to do it. I don't want to highlight it. I don't want it to be the highlight of my career. And second, they're not telling the story truthful. I'm not being involved in that. And my chief was very angry that I would not do that and provide that free service back to the officers.
How long was it before you were able to get back onto the road?
It was probably about a total of 3 months. They made me go through the psychological testing, and they did this really strange thing, in my opinion. They hired what they called a specialist, but he wasn't specialized in police work, to put me under hypnosis because I couldn't give a lot of information. So they wanted to put me under hypnosis to try to get a better description of the vehicle. And it never worked. In fact, the individual that they sent me to had no experience in police work, how to do it. In fact, he would ask me questions, leading questions that I would laugh at because I was trained as a law enforcement officer. He'd like, Tom, the car was green, right? I'm like, well, no, it wasn't green. But they would like lead me down the road, and I was never under hypnosis. I never went under. They got very frustrated with that. And then when I did return, they did not allow me to work a single patrol car vehicle. So I had to ride either with the sergeant or another officer in charge for at least a month or longer until that officer in charge or the sergeant felt I could get a single patrol car again. And their reasoning for that in a memorandum they wrote me was they did not want me to overreact to situations because of being shot in the line of duty. So their version was, we're not letting you go on your own until we see that you can demonstrate being in a single patrol vehicle going forward.
Now, your wife at the time is still with you. She's been with you for your entire career and after your career. What was it like in those early days when you went back onto the road? How was she able to deal with you going back, and how were you able to convince her that you were going to be okay going back onto the road, that you were doing the right thing?
Yeah, she didn't want me to go back, to be blunt about it. In fact, she really, really pushed me, almost begging me not to go back. She was scared to death. I can't imagine what she went through when they came and knocked on your door. I mean, it changed her forever. So she really pushed me. And I remember sitting in my living room and telling her, well, this is what I've trained for my whole life. This is my career. You know, we're newly married. I want to have a family. I need to have an income. I just can't get up and quit. The skills that I have are in law enforcement. And there was a lot of back and forth over that. She would not let me return to patrol until I got a bulletproof vest, another one, which the company supplied me with free. They gave me one anyways, even though I didn't do their ad campaign. They just didn't supply the department. And actually, in the years that followed, the union forced the village to pay for the bulletproof vest. So it took union action for that to happen. But she didn't want me to return, and I was not big on talking about it. So once we decided that I was going to come back, I had a scheduled vacation, and me and my wife went away on our own and came back, and I got mentally prepared to go back. I was still working the night shifts. And that's where my skills were for. That's where I was, and I remember telling her that, you know, my skills kicked in, and this is hard to believe unless you go through it, but like my training, I don't know how this happened, but my brain, well, when I was shot, and then when I woke up from hitting the bumper on the squad car, I instinctively reached for my radio. Within seconds, I knew it wasn't working. The wire was cut. I crawled back to the squad car, got on the police radio, and broadcast the information. And I didn't have to think about that. That instinctively happened. It went back to probably academy training and training that I had. And I remember telling my wife, this is what I'm trained for. This is what I did. I didn't even have to think about it. My body just crawled back to the squad car, just picked up the radio, and just broadcast I needed help. So that's what I do for a living. And I think that we were able to come to an agreement that I would continue my career.
What was it like for you those early days getting back onto the road? That transition now, going from a shooting, and now you're back on patrol. What was it like for you to make that?
It was hard. The officers wanted to do some celebratory type of dinner or event, which I said no to. So I didn't want to do any, hey, Tom's coming back to work, let's throw him a party type thing. They didn't really know what to do. They'd never had an officer shot. The department turned down a lot of help during that time. The FBI, the United States Secret Service, several other outside law enforcement agencies that were investigative agencies, not the patrol force, had offered their assistance for the criminal investigation. And initially, the village turned them down. The police chief turned them down. That was really hard on me because they hadn't made any progress on apprehension during that time. There had been no progress on the investigation at all. And it was difficult to adjust mentally to come back to answer calls, because in a suburban community like Riverside, there's some nights it's all and some nights it's nothing. I mean, Riverside was the type of community that it was all or nothing. There was really no in between. So it was very difficult. And I had no services provided. I had no one reach out to me and say, do you need to talk to somebody besides the individual that the village hired to clear me to come back to work? There was no peer support. We didn't even have an employee assistance program at that time. There was no EAP. There was just me and my wife discussing it. And then at one point I said, I'm not talking about it anymore. And after the shooting, about a year, probably about 2 to 3 years after the shooting, they put on a disc for me back then. It was probably a floppy disk back then. The actual radio tapes from the shooting. And I never, ever let my kids listen to that or my wife listen to it. I listened to it once and then I put it in a drawer. And I asked the village and my police chief to not release that to the media. They didn't have the freedom of information laws they do now, so the village didn't have to. But I asked them, if you get a request to release the radio tapes, I would not like that done. And they did not do that. So it was very hard to listen to that tape. And I did not want my kids, as they were growing up, and I did not really want my wife to go through that. So until recently, they never heard that radio tape.
No. And you at the time, you had no children. You since had you had 3 boys who've all gone into law enforcement. You went from patrol officer to chief of police for 13 years. And at a time when being shot so early in an officer's career could significantly impact their ability to move forward. And it wouldn't be unheard of for someone to leave law enforcement after that. And not just because of the shooting, but also because of the problems it causes at home. And you talked a little bit about what your wife struggled with when you went back onto the job. But you thrived, right? Your career didn't end. You had a family. You went on to lead the department. What was it like for you? Where was that drive to take what happened and to not just move forward, but to ultimately be in a position where you could start impacting change within your department? And interesting point is all 3 of your sons have gone into law enforcement. So you didn't shy them away from a career in law enforcement. They have all become police officers. They've all become law enforcement. And so you weren't turned away from the job. In fact, you took that experience and you continued to move with it in your career. As chief of police and looking back at what happened, what changes did you make so that nobody had to go through in Riverside what you experienced.
Yeah. So first of all, yeah, you're right. All three of my sons are police officers in suburban Chicago, and that initially my wife went nuts about. My wife's an accountant, and she would look at me and say, "Why can't one of our kids be an accountant? Why do they all have to be police officers?" She goes, "I never sleep at night," and that's still the case even today. But yeah, what changed is probably about 3 to maybe 5, 6 years after the shooting, we were doing a promotional exam. And somebody I respected very highly, if you probably know, and anyone listening to this podcast knows, there are certain leaders in the department that never reach the rank of lieutenant, deputy chief. They're like the people that all the patrol officers go to with years of experience, and they know the system. And one of them for me was an individual named Bob Gordon, and he told me, the administration is gonna look down on you a little bit, and I don't think you'll ever be able to move up the department past the rank of sergeant, because for some reason they view this shooting of you as being very negative, like it brought this negative light onto the village of Riverside and police department because they didn't really know how to handle it. And I was like, wow, that's terrible. And it took me 15 years to get to the rank of sergeant, and we would test for the promotions every 3 years, but in small departments, they're few and far between. And then when I got to sergeant, and then I was this patrol sergeant, then I went into detectives and was a detective sergeant. For the first time ever, Riverside went outside the department for a police chief when I was a detective sergeant, and this individual came in from Chicago, which obviously is a much bigger department. And I remember him at one of our staff meetings, he told all of us supervisors at his supervisor meeting that he wasn't a kingmaker, that he was going to only be the chief for 3, 4, 5 years, and he was hoping that he could mentor somebody along, be in a position to take over. But actually, he wanted to mentor several people, so the village would have a choice on who they could, up through the ranks. And I took that to heart. And when I went to see him, he told me, if you want to be police chief someday and be able to really make change, because change is in policy, Tom, you need to get your college degree. You need to go to these national programs for leadership. At that time, I only had an associate's degree, so I went back to college. I was fortunate that the village of Riverside paid your college back in those days, so I got my bachelor's degree and master's degree straight. I went to school for 4 years in a row. I was a detective sergeant. At night, I'd work during the day and went to night 4 straight years, earned my undergraduate and graduate. I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant during that time, and then I was promoted to deputy chief. And I lobbied my chief at that time to send me to Northwestern University Staff and Command School and to the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. And during my stint in that position, I was sent to both of those command schools. So then I kind of had like the checklist, and I really would always go back to, if you really want to be a person to make change in the department, you have to be in this position to draft policies and set policy decisions for the officers. And I didn't want to forget where I came from on patrol. So when they had when the chief left, the village made this announcement, public announcement during a press release, that they were going to open the competition for the police chief nationwide. And they hired a national consulting firm to come in and start the recruiting process. And I remember the village president at that time coming to me, because they had put me in as interim or acting chief. So when the chief left, I was the deputy chief. They put me in, and the village president came and said, "Are you willing to take the acting job?" I said, "Sure." And he goes, "So we'll consider you for the police chief's job." And I said, "Okay." Months go by, the recruiting process doesn't work. They hire a second recruiting company. And the village president comes back to me and says, "Are you willing to stay on beyond the 6 months I asked you to stay on?" I said, "You know what, I'll stay on as interim chief, and then I'll go back to my civil service rank of lieutenant." And he's like, "Well, why would you do that, Tom?" And I said, "Well, I've worked here 20 plus years." I go, "You know my work ethic, you know my skills. You see me every day. You see me at board meetings. I interact. I've been doing the budgeting for the department for probably 8 years now. Grant writing. I go, if you don't know my skills, I don't really feel that I want to go down that road. And he's like, oh, okay. He goes, I'm sorry you feel that way. And on a Saturday afternoon, I'm sitting in my house on a back porch, and my phone rings, and it's the village president and the village manager, and they asked me to meet them Monday morning. When I go in Monday morning, they're there, and they said, what does it take for us to get you to be the chief? We're going to drop the national search if you'll accept the position as police chief. So that's how it happened. Then we did some negotiation. But what I was really enthusiastic about is that the officers and the union had approached the administration in the village and said, this officer, our deputy chief is qualified. You guys can fire the chief whenever you want. If you don't hire him and give him a chance, there's something wrong with you. You control his position anyways. It's good for morale. He's well liked by the officers. This is a small suburban department. Why are you spending all these funds to do this national search? And I was really proud of that the officers supported me for the position. So that's how I got to be chief. But there were those individuals that said, because of the shooting, they'll just never put you in. And that inspired me to move forward.
A lot's happened. A lot's changed since back in those days in the 80s and even the early 90s. And I remember coming into law enforcement in 96, and it was still expected that you would you'd handle a call, and then you would move on to the next one. And regardless of what the call was, you just moved on to the next one. There wasn't a lot of attention paid to the impact of certain calls, of being shot in a line of duty, and what that would look like afterwards. One of the great things about this ambassador program, and you've been with us now as an ambassador for the memorial since last year. I think coming up on a year, actually. If I look back in my records, I think it was September of last year that we first met.
Correct.
But we're attached to the officer safety and wellness pillar of the memorial, and within the officer safety and wellness pillar, we have that insight into the Destination Zero program through the Officer Safety and Wellness team there that looks at programs throughout the country that have been instituted within departments to address certain needs, certain wellness needs and safety needs. And you're seeing these applications coming through from departments all throughout the country. And I just looked at one yesterday, which actually isn't a Destination Zero program, but it's a program that's been instituted up in York County, Maine, which is a very rural part of Maine. But even there, they're looking at the impact of the job on the officers and what needs to be put into place so that you really create a resilient officer, somebody who's going to be around for a long time. But the key thing, and I think it's highlighted through your example, is to thrive on the job, right? You don't want to just do your time. And I think departments are doing 25 to 30 years, where years ago it used to be you come in and you're 20 years on the job before you're eligible for retirement. That's been pushed out. We need to make sure that our officers get there. And a lot has changed. I know with the Connecticut State Police, we had started to institute over the years really a protocol for how a situation is dealt with when an officer is shot or involved in a shooting. And there's a lot of attention given to the immediate actions. I remember a number of years ago, I was at a seminar down in South Carolina called the Post Critical Incident Seminar, PCIS, which is put on a number of states, an absolutely fantastic program. But there was an officer was talking about being involved in a shooting and had mentioned it wasn't the shooting itself that was most impactful. It was how they were dealt with immediately after the shooting. And so, for instance, in one case, and I think in your situation, you touched upon it, you're almost made to feel like you did something wrong. And that really stuck with you. There was another example I heard from an officer that after a shooting, it's protocol that they usually take the firearm from the officer. which when you disarm an officer at a scene like that, when they're still in that hyper vigilant mode, it can actually be very detrimental. And there was a commander that had seen this happen and went up to the officer and proceeded to give the officer their firearm because he had a backup in the commander had a backup in the car. And that little act stuck with that officer through everything else that they had been through. That little act from that commander, and that's a leader, right? That's not just somebody who supervises, that's a leader. That made a significant difference to that officer, and they remembered it. And so how we handle something, how we handle these incidents has changed dramatically. And then the support that's offered. You said there was no EAP after there was no such resource available to you.
There was no resources outside
no peer support,
right,
peer support team
outside of what legally mandated to get me back to work. So it was a liability protocol that they were. Mm-hmm. There was no peer support at all. And over the years, I had a lot of opportunity to do speaking on this shooting, which I turned down. And I think I turned that down initially because the response was so poor. You're absolutely right when you say what happened afterwards was more devastating than the shooting. Thank God I survived. But I would 3, 4, 5 years later, I would get invitations to come to a Tactical Officers Association or other organizations to speak on it. And I always turned them down. In fact, this podcast we're doing now is probably one of the first I've ever done where I've detailed what took place in my shooting, what took place afterwards in my family, in the department, and also allowed the audio tape to be released from the radio traffic. That's never happened. So I'm in a position now that I feel like I can talk about it, and I think I have some worth that I could help officers through these or give them advice or show them my experience. But for over 25 years, I never did that. And that's because of what happened after the shooting.
As chief and based off of your decades within law enforcement, what are some of the most significant changes that you've seen in a positive light from where you were back in 1987 to where you were when you retired, as far as helping officers move beyond this, increase resiliency, and allow them to thrive, allow them to have careers in which they can still find fulfillment, enjoyment? What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen?
Certainly, the protocols are almost in every single agency. I put a lot of protocols in when I became chief, but there were some put in before me. The village did obtain an employee assistance program. Then they got a separate employee assistance program just for police. We had a protocol, a written protocol for officer-involved shootings, for officers who are shot in the line of duty. And then because we're a small municipality, we reached out to partner agreements with our neighboring agencies. And what we meant by that is if we ever had an officer shot in the line of duty again, we would have a team that would report to the station, and we would have a team that was 2 individuals with the family. We'd have a team that went to the hospital. We have a specific public information officer that deals with the media. So we had this broad policy, and because we're a smaller agency, we were able to partner with other agencies because they could use the same services, but then we were able to handle everything immediately. It immediately kicked in. We have contractual services now for police officer wellness through our insurance provider. In fact, our insurance company in Riverside that we utilized provided training and provided police officers who are retired that would respond to the scene, and also did just ongoing training, whether that be at a roll call or twice a year. We'd team up with the fire department and everybody would meet at our training rooms and we would go over these employee programs. We'd also just talk as police officers, firefighter, paramedics, and our dispatch personnel. So there's been a lot of improvement. In fact, in Illinois, they have apps you can put on your phone to immediately contact. That sounds kind of funny, but everybody has app where you can immediately reach out for help. And that's help in officer involved shootings. It's helps in suicide thoughts. It's help with family. I mean, so those resources were never there in 1987. They're absolutely here now.
They are. We're seeing more of that coming through. In looking at the applications coming through our Destination Zero program, you're seeing more and more apps that are available to officers, but you're seeing that benefit extended to the families too, recognizing that it has to be treated as a whole. You can't just treat and pay attention to the officer without taking into consideration the family. Because like what you were talking about when you returned back to the road, your wife was going through her own fears. She had her own concerns, right? And that plays out. So we're seeing these resources extended to the family, which I think is important when you're looking at the big picture, and you're looking at how ultimately you're going to be able to help someone. You have to look at all aspects of their life, so that you're not just dealing with one and failing to recognize that the impact that, say, a shooting, or even when we're talking critical incidents, has on the family member, because it's that support system that ultimately comes into play to help all officers move forward. I don't want to leave it just hanging where we don't know what ultimately happened. And unfortunately, in your case, the shooter was not identified before the statute of limitations ran out. But that didn't stop you from still doing some work at the legislative level. And you were talking about the importance of making a difference, not just locally, but at the legislative level. Walk us through that.
Yeah, what had happened is during that, in 1987, there was statute of limitations in Illinois on attempted murder. And my case went down as attempted murder. It was only 3 years back then. And probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years after that, maybe closer to 10, ATF made a phone call to our agency and said, hey, did you have an officer shot in the line of duty in 1980s that survived? And they said yes. They're like, hey, we need to meet with you. And what had transpired is ATF had made a large gun arrest on a gun running organization that was running guns from state to state. And they arrested this Chicago gang member. And while they're interviewing him, he's going away for a long time. This is what I find out from the ATF agents later on, that he says, I'll make you a deal. You cut me some slack, I'll give you a police officer that was killed. That's what he says. And they're like, yeah, okay, we talked about it. He's like, now there was a suburb that had a police officer killed. That kind of demonstrates that they thought I had died. That in the suburbs, and he goes, I think it was Riverside. And the ATF agents are like, no, we never heard of that. Like, you're full of crap. Well, they get up and leave the room. They have some people do some research. They found out that there was a Riverside police officer shot that wasn't killed. He survived. That's when they placed the phone call. And they put 2 and 2 together, come up with 4. And what happened was this gang member, along with 2 others, there were 3 total, had been in prison. And one of their gang member hierarchy guys was up for parole. His parole was denied in Illinois because of his criminal background and some incidents he had while in the prison system. The house in front of where it was shot, a parole officer lived there. So these gang members that night were coming back to kill him. They were going to do retaliation for their gang member leaders being denied parole. They were going to kill the gentleman that lived in this home, who was a parole officer. They had never put that together during the investigation. They get this together, and then all of a sudden they go to the state's attorney here in Illinois, and specifically in Cook County, and they presented, and they said, yeah, you guys will get enough evidence to clear the case, but we can't charge anybody. There's no statute. The statute of limitations is over. And when they told me that, I couldn't comprehend that, because in Illinois at that time, you could pass a bad check and they could hunt you down for 100 years. So forgery had no statute of limitations, when attempted murder of a police officer had a 3-year statute of limitation.
Wow.
I got together with my state legislator who lived in Riverside. Her name is Judy Bartopinka at the time. She's since deceased. We went to Springfield, where the capital was in Illinois, and we lobbied for legislation that she drafted on my behalf to raise the statute of limitations, if not eliminate it. Initially, it was raised from 3 years to 7 years. Because she couldn't get it passed, it being no statute of limitations. At the time, the political atmosphere was not where they wanted to leave it forever, if you can imagine that. So, but I did a lot of lobbying and testifying down in Springfield, either on my behalf as a police officer, or I would go down on my own, both times. And the legislation was passed overwhelmingly. In addition to that, she was also able to get a piece of trailer legislation passed for tinted windows. So they were able to pass a tinted window law in Illinois for the percentage of the window that can be tinted. And those were coupled as a bill, and it was passed overwhelmingly. I was really, really proud of that. And I was ecstatic that a state legislator who was pro-law enforcement would really work with me and push on that.
That's great that you were able to make a difference at that level, and it's kind of mind blowing that you could pass a bad check, and there was no statute of limitations on that. But at that time, you had to fight to get the statute of limitations removed for attempted murder. Being able to share those experiences shows that you still, even after retirement, that you have a lot to give. And I think with a lot of younger officers coming into law enforcement today, and we've seen an exodus, if you will, of experience over the last, I would say maybe within the last 4 to 5 years, this exodus of experience leaving law enforcement. So to be able to share that story, because it does show where we were years ago and the advances that we've made to take care of our own along the way. I appreciate you being here to share that with us today. Any final words that you'd like to leave our audience with before we end things today?
Well, it's an honor to serve as an ambassador for the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, without a doubt. It may actually be the most important position I've ever had in my career. And I say that because I was looking for something to do when I retired, and I came across the ambassador program. And, I get to do it for the right reasons. I don't get a paycheck. I don't want a paycheck. I don't seek out the recognition. I just want to help police officers' families. I want to push the police positive agenda, because there was so much negative publicity or thoughts around America after the rioting and protests that took place in March of 2020 and afterwards. And, I get to do this and I get to give back, and it really makes me feel honorable. And it really does. And I can tell you, sometimes I feel like I'm not worthy, because when I look at the other ambassadors that I share this program with, and like when you talked about when we do the onboarding or we do interviews, when you look at those individuals I work with, background, it's stunning. The police leadership coming into the ambassador program, and that's from people that retire at patrol level all the way up to like me, the chief. But when you see their background and their education and where they are throughout the United States, I sometimes feel like they did more in 10 years than I did in 30. I can tell you the ambassador program is well positioned with really true professionals and dedicated people. And I'm so honored to be associated with that group of individuals.
It's humbling. It's humbling to see the experience coming into the program. It's humbling to talk to those that are applying into the ambassador program, and the experience that they're bringing. The stories and the backgrounds. It's it's interesting to me once you start networking and connecting with officers from around the country, the similarities within the profession, but then also the individual qualities that they bring into the job. And then the one thing that everybody has in common is that need to give more, to honor the men and women whose names are up on the wall, and trying to keep names off the wall, like through the ambassador program and bringing awareness. And your story of wearing a bulletproof vest back in the mid 1980s, when that was unheard of, is the reason why you're here today to talk to us. And that need for attention to being safe out there, and how something can go from 0 to 60 in a split second without any provocation, without any warning, as was the case in your story. So I'm glad that you were able to share that with us today, and I think it's important for others to hear too how things have changed in a positive way. We forget that sometimes, right? It is important to look at all of the positives. That's what we highlight. Those positive changes in law enforcement, those positive things that are being done, because they're being done all throughout the country. And you took an experience and you made a positive out of it, and you've lived through a period of time when there wasn't a lot of attention to the well-being of officers, and to a period now where we have apps for our phone that can provide us with resources, and we could share those resources with our families. So you've really seen this ebb and flow over the years, but you've seen how ultimately we've made a lot of progress for the better.
Yeah, I would say for individuals listening to this podcast that, when I was told I would never rise beyond sergeant, don't listen. And I, as you said earlier, I thrived, and you can achieve that. For me, I had to work through a lot of things, and I also had to work with my wife through things. But that just motivated me more. But you can push through it, and those that tell you no, just push them aside and march forward. And that's what I would encourage people to walk away from, is not only will you succeed after this type of incident, if you get the right support, you'll thrive.
Absolutely. And thank you, Tom, for being with us today. Thank you to your wife for supporting you through those years, for sticking by your side. That is a tough place to be, a spouse of someone in law enforcement, those sleepless nights. And then she ends up with 3 sons that all go into law enforcement. So there has not been there's not been a restful night, I'm sure, for her in a very, very long time. But we are so glad that she's a part of your life. Thank you for being here with us today. And I look forward to our continued work together.
Thank you. So do I. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.
A special thanks to Matt for hosting today's episode of Lifeline, featuring fellow ambassador, retired Chief of Police Tom Weitzel. Thanks again to Mission Square Retirement for their generous support of the Ambassador Program. Precinct 444 is proud to offer Lifeline as one of our core shows. Listeners can expect content with a holistic wellness approach focused on supporting American law enforcement. This program is intended to make it safer for those who serve, keep names off the memorial walls, and to share best practices to promote overall resilience and survivability. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.